Chapter 4. Trust and Respect Together. The Salt and Pepper of a Relationship. After looking at trust and respect independently of one another, now let's combine them. As you're listening to the audio portion of this book, I'll have to describe some of the graphs that also appear in the book. I present this graph in the hope that you experience yourself in each of the 4 quadrants. Think of this as a mirror to parts of yourself that you may not be fully aware of. As we walk through these quadrants, please think of yourself standing in each. For those listening to the audiobook, this is a 4-quadrant model. The x-axis, the horizontal axis, is trust. The vertical axis is respect. These two are broken into 4 separate quadrants, and I'll be walking through that as I read through this text. By placing trust on the x-axis, horizontal, and respect on the y-axis, vertical, we see an interesting picture emerge. In this graph, we quickly understand where an individual is sitting in relationship to another, and we can thereby anticipate the kind of challenges that he or she will likely face in their relationship. For instance, when you have a high trust, so for those listening, that would be on the vertical axis, a high level of trust, but a low respect for another, for those listening, that would be low on the vertical axis, you will tend to be dismissive of what the other is saying. We trust this person is good at heart and means well, but he or she doesn't have anything of real value to offer. When this person says something looking for confirmation, we might nod and ignore their excitement. This was exactly the dynamic we witnessed in the interaction between the husband and wife who was considering the yoga class. The husband loved and trusted his wife. He just did not respect that she could achieve the goal of making money through the courses. If one or both people in a relationship sit long in this quadrant, there'll be an undercurrent of tension and an increasing discomfort with vulnerability. Now imagine yourself talking to someone in this quadrant. How does it feel? How do you act? How easy is it for you to remain open? Now multiply that feeling over and over again for a few weeks or months. What's the likelihood that this relationship is going to thrive? If we instead jump to the opposite corner with a low trust but a high respect, we see some different feelings emerge. We recognize that this person has a lot to offer, but we don't feel safe with him or her. We're skeptical. We say things like, he does good work, but I'm not sure about him in general. Or, he's smart, but I don't feel comfortable around him. What feelings come up when you're with someone who has achieved a lot and yet you don't trust them? How safe is this relationship? For some, feelings of aggression and aversion can emerge, while others will experience fear. This is why both of these qualities are essential for healthy relationships. And when relationships are out of balance in either direction, it's reflected in all of our interactions. If you are in the lower left quadrant, this relationship is in serious distress and is most likely highly reactive, with both parties either fighting or running away. For those listening on the audio, that would be someone with a very low trust and a very low respect. If you want to understand this quadrant better, think of anyone in your life who has gone through a bitter divorce. There is neither trust nor respect, which turns into a painful and costly lesson for both. The label in this quadrant is aversion, for good reason. It is here where we go as far as paying lawyers so we don't need to even face that person. Thankfully, knowing where you are in the graph is the first step to shifting behavior. My wife, Ronnie, and I have been in all of these quadrants at one point or another during our relationship. When we started off, we didn't understand exactly what to expect from one another. I remember that we were in our dating phase before calling ourselves boyfriend and girlfriend, and she made comments that she did not want to move too quickly. We should not push for exclusivity, she said. Since I was ready to be more serious, her comments made my trust in the relationship low. Although I respected her decision, I was cautious. I couldn't help but notice when she received text messages when we were together. I got triggered when I saw her look and appear to keep it secret. In this phase of our relationship, I was never quite sure where we stood. Of course, this lack of trust translated into our contact with one another. This all came to a head one morning when she informed me casually that she was technically still married, which came as a shock to me. "I have to get through the divorce," she said. "What?" I exclaimed. "Are you kidding me?" "No," she responded. "I'm still married and I need to finalize my divorce." "Don't you think you should have told me this at the very beginning?" I asked. "No," she said. "It doesn't affect our relationship, so why would it matter? It's not relevant to you." "Hold on," I replied. "You don't get to decide what's relevant for me. If you think something isn't relevant for me, then please ask. Don't assume. Please let me be the judge of what I don't find relevant." The lack of trust that had built up over time had a moment to release. We moved through it and eventually moved to a deeper level of trust, but it took a few months of understanding what was important for the other. We've now been together for more than 15 years. There have been many times when our dynamic has flipped to the other quadrants where I had high trust for Ronnie but showed low levels of respect. In our first years together, a common discussion would arise. She would share stories of problems she was encountering at work, and I would immediately offer solutions. I was not respecting her, nor was I caring for her needs. By always coming back with solutions, I was dismissing that she had not already considered what I was sharing, and I almost never asked for permission. I've learned since that when I feel I have a solution for someone, I first ask for permission to share it. Even if they appear to ask for it, I still check. Now, a typical talk with Ronnie would look something like this. Her: "I'm having some challenges at work. I'd like to know what you think." Me: "Okay, is it okay for me to interrupt you when I have a question?" Her: "No, please wait until the end. I'm trying to work this out and it helps when you listen." Me: "Okay, so you are not really looking for me to comment." Her: "I can't say that yet. If I see that I'm unable to get this worked out when I speak it out loud, then I'd appreciate your recommendations." You see that when Ronnie asks me for support, I don't even assume that she wants my thoughts on the matter. I respect that it is her process, and as long as she decides how she'd like me to be present for her, I can do that. It was not always like this. In our early years, conversations would go something like this. Her: "So I'm having problem at work with Billy and I think I should ... Me: "Before you say another word, why don't you simply get rid of him? It's been a long time that you have been discussing this and I don't see it's going anywhere." Her: "This isn't really helping." Me: "Maybe so, but you asked me for my opinion and I'm giving it to you." Her: "I did not want your opinion, I wanted your support." Me: "Well, this is what my support looks like." I was not respecting Ronnie because I had already judged that she was not dealing with the situation well. I saw things that I thought she could be doing without really understanding the context of what she was facing. Lack of respect shows up when we're no longer curious about how the situation may unfold because we already have so many preconceived ideas of how it should be dealt with. In our relationship today, we very infrequently fall into the top left or bottom right quadrants. When it does occur, we are quick to discuss it. There's not a lag time between the discomfort and the inevitable discussion. This is where I see a lot of damage occurs in relationships. The hours of festering thoughts that then bleed into the discussions afterwards. The emotional buildup that has the potential to turn into an explosion. I often say, we're always one day away from a divorce. It sounds callous, but I mean it genuinely with clear intention. I've never really liked the wedding vow, I take you to be my lawfully wedded husband or wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I found that it can be an excuse to avoid difficult discussions, the kind of discussions that may eventually lead to divorce. This leads to an interesting paradox. If I don't want to discuss the hard things, our relationship begins to get weighed down with everything that's undealt with. In wanting to avoid a divorce by not discussing the difficult things, there's a higher likelihood of ending up with one. So instead, I proclaim that we are always a day away from a divorce as a way of making sure that nothing goes unsaid. It ensures that we never take our relationship for granted. In that way, we don't rest in the relationship. We don't accept the narrative that life is suffering at the hands of the other just because we agreed to it at an altar. My preference is to love Ronnie more and more each year, and so far so good. But we're still always one day away from a divorce. As you dance between these quadrants, realize that if you are in a quadrant, then there is a great likelihood the other is in the same quadrant in relationship to you. It's very rare that you are distrusting of someone and they are trusting of you. Going back to the systems diagram that was shown in an earlier chapter, by treating someone a certain way, it's very likely that they feel the same way in relationship to us, and the state of distrust reinforces itself. You are doing both of yourselves a favor by sharing how you're feeling without judgment or expectations as a way of creating a new level of trust and respect. We will get into how to do that later in this book. The lesson in this book: if trust or respect has been lost, start there. The exercise, Lewis and Clark. In this chapter, we see the importance of balancing trust and respect. In this exercise, just as Lewis and Clark mapped their exploration across the continental divide of the Americas in the early 1800s, so too will you map some of your most important relationships. Take 3 people in your life with whom you have varied relationships. Run through the following questions for each of the 3 people you have chosen and put a dot where they land on the graph. So, as you're listening to this audiobook, imagine to yourself that there's a 4-quadrant graph, as we've discussed. The x-axis is trust, the y-axis is respect. I'm going to ask you now to rate each of these individuals on a scale of 1 to 10 on trust and respect, and then imagine for yourself where they would appear on the graph. So let's begin. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all and 10 being completely, how far do I trust this person? On a scale of 1 to 10, how far do I respect this person? Now, if you can, combine those 2 and see where that individual falls on the graph. Of course, if the 2 numbers are over 5, it'll fall into the top right quadrant. Anything less would fall into either the bottom right or the top left. Now let's do the same once again for another person in your life. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all and 10 being completely, how far do I trust this person? Again, on a scale of 1 to 10, how far do I respect this person? Now take another moment and plot that on the graph. The recap. Reflecting on your answers will help you see where you are in relationship to these people in your life. Take a moment to see where you placed your marks. If your marks are either in the top left or bottom right quadrants, there are things you can do to improve the relationship. If you're in the bottom left, the journey will be a bit tougher. In the end, this is a decision you get to make. While considering, keep in mind that there are consequences for your mental and physical well-being that go well beyond the relationship. This leads to a conclusion I've drawn for myself. I do not heal my troubled relationships for others, but rather for myself. People often have a hard time dedicating to healing a broken relationship because the odds can feel insurmountable. I like to look at it another way. What's the cost of not healing the relationship? What are the chances that this relationship will flourish if I give up on it?